Happy day, friends. My name is Ashley. Welcome to my space. This particular series is going to be about a system called the Fourth Way. It was introduced to, the world from George Gurdjieff in approximately 1918 in that time frame. And it was introduced to me by a teacher named Onami now, and I found her through searching for more information on A Course in Miracles. And that is a spiritual path of enlightenment of one way, and that one rolls off to Gabby Bernstein, Marianne Williamson, and other teachers. And while I believe that that is a beautiful teaching, I was still craving and looking for more when I came across Onami, who had also studied A Course in Miracles, was starting to talk about the more esoteric, more deeper meanings behind other teachings like the Fourth Way. It totally sparked all interest. It spoke to me in different ways and something that I hadn't really heard in other various teachings. And I still continued to learn and study other teachings like yoga philosophy, human design, gene keys, astrology, and lots of other things. However, if you really spend time with me, I will refer back to a Fourth Way. So a little introduction and just doing my best to be, I'm a teacher in training. A Course in Miracles says that anybody who wants to be a teacher can be a teacher, but also there's this sort of element of you can't actually have something unless you can give it away. And there's a lot about teaching things in order to establish them as your own. So here goes. Fourth Way in a introductory kind of essence would say that inside of us is a house. And in the house, there's fine furniture, beautiful rooms, a library. And instead of us living and wandering throughout the entire house, we live in the basement and the kitchen. And if someone were to tell us about this house and its furnishings and the other rooms, we wouldn't believe them. We would think it was a fairy tale. And we would just continue on about our way, living our life in a very small way. Fourth Way says, does it intrigue you? And is it worth your effort to try to find out if there's different rooms? Like, is there more to this internal life that you haven't necessarily explored in that way? Do you want to get outside of the basement? And in a way that I understand it, and sometimes we do find that like my life is really limited. This looks like depression for me, really limited in one space, one idea, one concept. I live in just the basement. So this starts to speak to me automatically. I'm curious. I don't know what I'm curious of. Somebody gives me this opportunity that says inside of you, you can live in, for me, a room that has a bathtub with a window. It's a psychology of studying oneself. What I think is fascinating when they bring this idea to you is you're not actually just one self. So to study oneself is an aim, but you first have to acknowledge that you're not one self. You have multiple eyes. Throughout the day, you shift in between these different, not personalities and not necessarily even roles, but using this idea of like one eye is like, hell yeah, I'm gonna lose 10 pounds. I'm gonna get my shit together. And the other eye somehow swoops through, takes the baton without you even noticing, and was like, burgers and ice cream it is. So we live in this like passing off the baton, but we live in it very unaware. So the idea of studying oneself is the aim, but first you have to study what you actually already are. And so you already are multiple eyes. That's a place to even begin. So we have this idea that we're multiple eyes. We live in this house that we're just in the basement. And another thing that we need to know about ourselves is that we're often thinking when we're feeling when we're thinking, and we don't know which one is which. We've got these sort of containers and centers inside of us, but they're oftentimes working incorrectly. Because we were programmed essentially from the age of 1 to 7 by our family, whether it was just by mimicking things, imitation, or survival mode, we come up with these ways of being. And if you're born in an essential way and you're not necessarily given anything, we can't be given anything. You would just be at like your factory settings and you'd be just a machine ready to go and do whatever the light inside of you says to do. But in our world, we live in a society with contracts, structures, our families tell us what to do. We've got laws, we've got things and ways to behave. So we start to behave in that way. And so when we think that we should be feeling, or when we do feel something, we actually have to think our way out of it. We have to think our way into feeling certain things. And so we're kind of working as a machine that is like wrongly functioning. And it's not wrong, but we have these things that are not noticed consciously to us that are creating our behaviors, and we are not necessarily in control. We're sleeping in one way, shape, or form. So what Fourth Way says is like, one, is it worth the effort to even try to get out of the basement? Or is it worth the effort to try to be or see and notice something different about yourself? For me, it's hugely based on relief. Like anytime I even started self-discovery, I wanted to feel relief from the guilt, shame, pain, grief, shame, all of it that I didn't know how to deal with. I realized that I wasn't dealing with that shit was dealing with me. And then Fourth Way gives you this idea of like, okay, let's start to observe from this perspective. And the way that we're wrongly functioning is that we function so automatically that we're not even noticing it. So the self-observation is starting to notice the objective things about ourselves. So sometimes I think that in other ways, I hate to use examples on sometimes, but sometimes I need the comparison of, okay, we're just going to go in and we're going to add more things and we're going to manifest, we're going to do these things and we're going to create new behaviors and we're going to be different. Sometimes I believe that the self-observation in an objective way is, what do we have to stop doing? And can you look at it and not necessarily manifest more, but can you notice that you've got these multiple eyes, that you're functioning kind of wrongly, or you're misfiring in ways, and like, why? And can you inquire and can you get clear, and is it worth trying? We have this self that we're born with, and then after about 7, we start to become the sort of self that's expected of us and that's acceptable. But we have a self that we remember when we are really, really present, and we find ourselves in really, really vulnerable, but also safe and intimate places. And the best way to kind of explain to what it feels like to not remember yourself is when autopilot, you get in the car, you drive somewhere, you wake up and you're there. You have completely went on autopilot, and many times that's just like what our life looks like as a whole. So self-remembering is when you could be like, I am here. I'm having this experience, how wild, my feet are on the ground and I'm witnessing this thing and it's making me feel this way. So it's also called a little bit of like divided attention. So you can notice yourself and notice the external environment. But if you try to sit still with just a thought for yourself for a period of time, you'll notice that your mind starts to wander off into like, what's next? What did I forget? What do I have to do? Who am I? I have to pee. I'm hungry. And you have a really hard time staying with yourself, remembering yourself. So when you practice that idea of just remembering yourself all by itself, or even just acknowledging when you try to remember yourself, there's like a audience, a crowd, loud as hell with your multiple eyes, but you don't have the centered unity of one of you. If you did, you wouldn't lose your thoughts so quickly when you try to focus on one thing. This self-objective observation will show you that like you're a mechanical being, you're moving without your own will. It's happening without your input. You're kind of this not a victim, but like you're a law of accident. It's happening to you. So you can notice that we don't really have any free will if you're self-observing from this objective perspective, that things happen to you, you're habitual, your thought processes take you in various directions. And if you wanted to have a value or a point of why you were doing any self-discovery, it'd be to have more self-authority and not necessarily control over yourself, but remember yourself. It's not really control, but just remember that you're there. And usually you're on this like ridiculous autopilot of like, not only do you not ever, when is now and where is here? That's my own articulation of some of the work, but like that brings you right to where you are. And if you can notice if you notice what it feels like to be right where you are, you can notice how often you weren't here. And so you have this understanding of, okay, I have no self-remembering. I'm not very much present, because you're all remembering something else. And when you look at your relationships, your finances, your workplaces, and you realize that maybe just at the simplest introduction of it is you're not present. So the cause of you not being present, or the effect of you not being present, is that you struggle with your relationships, you struggle with your finances, you struggle with just feeling any type of unity and harmony within yourself. Your machine is feeling uncomfortable. It's running kind of off away from you, and you don't really know why. But with some practical methods and tools, bring you to like, how can you get an objective observation of who I am and what causes and effects are happening in order to get me to where I'm at right this second. So it's like those wrong functions of, oh man, like I really wanted to be present, wanted to be attentive, want to be these sort of things, but because I have this repetitive pattern running that I'm unaware of, I can't get to what I want to do. So we struggle with like, oh, I think I could do these next things, I could do these things, but we have these really, really rooted behaviors and that are like, absolutely not. You are a machine, and when you try to go off the rails, it makes us uncomfortable. Get back over here. And so just noticing that is like self-observation. It's the beginning of work of fourth way. We have this funny thing that we imagine something in our mind, our imagination. We have two worlds. We have one world that we like reflect on. We have one world that nobody else can see but us. And we tend to make things up. We tend to fortune tell, or really time travel, or we just like, we think we've seen so many things so many times, that's just how it's going to play out. So we're like, we imagine that something's going to happen, and then we believe it, and then we forget that we imagined it. So we have this sort of accidental lying that we do to ourselves. We lie assuming that there's no other options but the one that we created or the one that we witnessed. We have these lies that we are an I. Every time I say, I want this, I'm lying, because there's not just one I, there's 100,000 I's. We don't necessarily even mean to lie when we say, I'm going to lose 10 pounds, but another I steps in and says, no, you're not. No, I'm not. And so it's this idea of this imagination that gets caught up inside of us, and we're lying and not really realizing it because we're not present. We're in this like automated mechanical sense of how we're supposed to deal with other people and reactions and things of that nature. And so we don't know ourselves, so that lie doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing it in a malicious way. You just haven't taken the time to figure out who you are and how you react and respond and yada yada, so you don't know what you're going to do. They don't know what you're going to do. So you've not necessarily lied, but I would say that another way to look at the value is, can you get to a more consistent you? When you're not sure how you're going to behave or react or respond, then like you're not necessarily a great friend, lover, employee, boss, whatever. You're erratic, or you are like hijacked, or you're asleep. You're asleep, really, is what it goes down to. And so fourth way is very strong on like verifying these things. So you have these concepts, you apply them to your life in the sense of a question or curiosity. And so you ask yourself, like, is there a chance that because I'm not present in my life and because I don't understand the way that I actually work, that I'm hurting relationships in my life? That I'm not being my best self? That these things, these behaviors are coming from me not necessarily seeing it from this perspective. Sometimes I think that everything has a place. Tarot cards, astrology, all of the various coaches. It's just, how are those things directly applying to you right now? Where can you put them into integration? And how can you be like, I need sort of a moral compass or a direction of what I'm doing and how to do it. So fourth way narrows everything down to like, chiefly, we don't have an aim. We're aimlessly wandering the world because we're a machine. And the machine really only has the aim that's given to it. It's not necessarily the aim that you give it. So my favorite part about fourth way is how it kind of breaks down good and evil, good and bad, right and wrong, and how we interact with that and what it means. And so it pretty much simplifies good and evil down to, what is your aim? If your aim is to leave Wyoming and go to Florida and you drive northwest, you're going the wrong way. It's bad. It's evil in the sense of your aim was to go the other direction. You don't really have a lot of awareness where we are in our place, if you want to acknowledge it objectively, you do things so habitually, and you and I also do things more in a sleeping pattern, that when you decide you're going to do something, you don't know who decided it. So you don't necessarily have the same weight of doing right and wrong because you're asleep at the wheel. And so it's easy to say, like, somebody else do this for me, somebody else make a decision. I don't want to have the responsibility, or in this case, I don't want to have the consequences. And so consequences are at its root like what self-authority and self-remembering is, because you don't necessarily have to be like, oh no, what are the consequences going to be when I just like wander aimlessly through life? When you're self-remembered and you're present, you're going to do things with a lot more attention and a lot more presence, quite literally. And you're not just subject to like whatever's going to happen. You're actually in a life that you could consider beyond like good and bad is the way that we have decided it, but you could just be having a good life because you're on aim. You're doing the purpose that is inside of you, that you're aiming for, that your behavior is aligned with. It's simple, and it's not very woo-woo, which is kind of like my favorite thing about it, is it's as practical as you can get, but it also creates this, for me, a whimsical sort of magical experience of these new abilities help you feel like you have all these other new possibilities in your life. And so the woo-woo-ness is not just everything is frequency and energy and da-da-da-da-da, but you have a new, I have had the experience now of being like through this ability to clear up my multiple I, stop lying. I don't ever stop lying. I struggle. So that one's hard because it's just hard, right? They're all hard. You know, none of these are perfect. Also, none of these are perfect. And I'm not perfect at any of them. These are just methods and things that I'm grappling with. And I think that it's really important to acknowledge that none of this work is to be perfect. And as soon as I think that you get perfect, you've probably missed a whole slew of things that you got to take some self-awareness and inventory of. And so a lot of it, verification, right? Can you continue to keep verifying, setting an alarm to wake yourself up and ask yourself, are you in it? Are you in the right path? Are you doing the right thing? And the right thing only being, what's your aim? So I've been backing off a lot lately on trying to share with anybody who I think wants to know about themselves, but that might not be their aim. My aim at the root of everything I am is to figure myself out and enjoy trying. I know I'm not going to figure it out. The mystery is totally unknown, and I really accept that. Maybe the whole point too is for me to be comfortable in the unknown, but at least know the vessel that I'm working with. At least, know how to communicate with other people around me better, know how to play into love, relationship, intimacy, money, death, sex, know how to engage in those things that make the human experience so real, and know what things in my mechanical programming are getting in the way of my human experience. Because if you can't find value in doing personal work, then I would also ask you, like, what are your personal values? This doesn't get really super big on like what your personal value is, but it would be your aim. So in a big way, when I'm taking this a little less serious, other than like my aim is to have harmony and unity within myself, and so that I can experience life to the fullest. But another aim I would have is so that I can play. I am only really here to play. And so all these things that get in my way, I need to know, because I'm here to play. So that was just a very short introduction of maybe like barely the first chapter, and some just shared descriptions of maybe that means something to you. Maybe you're interested in it. I'm going to continue on sharing more about it and how I apply these concepts and these various methods to my own life. Thank you for being in my space. Please come back again. Happy day. Peace and love.